Welcome to AI on the Fly. I am your host, Brett Hallinan, and today I invited autonomous vehicle veteran Chris Barker to discuss with me the massive $1 trillion infrastructure bill that's in Congress today. Specifically, I want to talk about how is this going to impact mobility of the future. Chris, welcome.
Hi, Brett. Thanks. It's a pleasure to see you.
Yeah, thanks for coming on board. You know, I wanted to just put this front and center. It's taking a lot of headlines in the news that's out there today. Can you give us a quick synopsis of what is this bill and where is it today?
So this is being described as a generational piece of legislation as far as its financial impact to transform our transportation and our infrastructure systems across the United States. It's $1 trillion in federal funding. $500 billion in new funding opportunity across all aspects of transportation and infrastructure, and is expected to really jumpstart a whole lot of new development projects, everything from our roadways to our bridges, seaports, airports, improving our broadband connectivity, improving environmental outcomes related to transportation, looking at things like electric vehicles, a whole host of things. So there's a lot of excitement. This legislation has been a long time in the coming as far as its ability to jumpstart and accelerate the modernization of our transportation systems. And everybody's hopeful that it will be officially approved by the White House and kicked off hopefully the back half of this year.
So what is the current status of that? I know there's been some debate and kind of some ping pong and back and forth that's going on. Where are we today?
So there's two parts of the legislation. There's a $1 trillion transportation infrastructure bill that has gone through the House and the Senate for review and fundamental approval. There's an accompanying $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill with additive measures to go on top of the transportation infrastructure bill. The reconciliation package has been approved by the House. It's now been sent to the Senate for review and deliberation. And the decision on that will be decided likely in the next few weeks. And then hopefully both bills will be advanced to the president's office for official signature and approval.
Got it. Interesting. So we're both in autonomous mobility, autonomous vehicles. What do you see as kind of the promise that this could potentially bring, to our industry if this goes through? What does it mean for us?
Well, a number of things. One, first and foremost, for any mode of transportation, particularly autonomous transportation, we need good quality roadways, smooth, safe roadways, free of potholes and obstructions and things of that nature. So bringing roads to a certain state of good repair is going to be essential. In addition to improving the roadways and building new roadways, though, there's things like, are we going to start looking at changing the roadscape itself, putting in possibly sensor technology that will ultimately guide autonomous vehicles, and putting in other equipment that will help the vehicles detect perhaps future issues with the roadway so that the vehicles can say, hey, there's a pothole, or there's an obstruction or something that can improve how public works departments monitor the safety of roadways. The other part of this is a big focus on broadband improvement. So 5G connectivity, which you often hear about, the ability for vehicles to communicate with infrastructure. And in the case of autonomous vehicles, this is tremendously important so that communication is happening in real time, much like us as human beings make decisions behind the wheel of a car, whether to stop at a red light, advance at a green light. All that broadband connectivity is going to be really, really vital to ensure that you can deliver autonomous vehicles at scale, bigger fleet sizes. And then another big part is around electrification and transportation. So a lot of these new autonomous vehicles are either going to be electrified or fuel cell powered. And so making sure that we have the grid infrastructure modernized to be able to support those vehicles at a larger scale. And also being able to have the charging infrastructure and all the things that are associated. So those are going to be really kind of bedrock things to help us go from pilot phases with autonomous vehicles to much bigger deployments.
No, that makes total sense. I think a lot of times when people think of infrastructure, they think of physical roads, but obviously, the connectivity, whether it be the sensors or the connectivity to the cloud and the processing, is a huge part of that, and enabling that, for the future.
The processing is another key part too, because if you think about all the decisions we make as human beings driving a car, you're now writing lines of code for all those decisions. And so there's going to be an enormous amount of data that's generated and has to be captured and processed and analyzed. And so another part of how this funding could come into play is how do we create large data centers that help cities and autonomous vehicle companies exchange information about how to design these systems and how they integrate into the roadscapes and the cityscapes across the country. And that data is going to be the vital component to make that all possible. So hopeful that there's going to be a continuing level of funding support for data centers and data analytics to go on with the other things that I mentioned.
That's incredible. I'm really curious to see how this plays out. Can you, when you think about infrastructure, and I know we talked about this a little bit in the past in terms of how big of a milestone this is for an investment, into our country, really. And the last one being, in the example that you gave was the Hoover Dam was built, when we're looking at massive infrastructure investment and what that meant for the U.S. What do you envision this doing for us going forward? And can you trust the technology? I mean, it's like, we joked about this earlier. It's like, I switch laptops, every 5 years and phones every 2 years. Can we invest in technology today that will actually be part of the infrastructure that'll be around for a longer period of time, that will get a return on that investment? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's an interesting point. I mean, you go back to the New Deal era, back when Franklin Roosevelt was president, and there was an enormous amount of capitalization brought in by the federal government to develop our roads, our bridges, our hydroelectric facilities, things that still, like the Hoover Dam, have lasting power and significant relevance today. And so now we're at this next reinvention phase for transportation and infrastructure. And the key thing is thinking not only what do we need today, but to your point, how do we kind of think about the future proofing that's going to be required so that whatever we invest this money in, it's going to have decades, multi-decades long lasting impact to society. And we really are at this interesting pivot point in transportation where, every 100 years there's a major groundswell of change. And we're going from fossil fuel powered and combustion engines to electrified transportation, self-driving cars, drones, drone taxis, all these things that are going to change mobility as we know it. And it's really important that the infrastructure is ready for that change and is keeping pace with what industry is developing. So it's vital that these kind of infrastructure funding packages come in to set the stage for what's possible, not just for today, but for 20, 30, 40 years in the future.
Agreed. I think what I'd love to do is, after this bill hopefully gets through Congress and the Senate and gets signed by the president, have you come back and kind of do some guesswork in terms of where are some of these dollars going to go, and where's the rubber going to meet the road, per se.
Be happy to. Yes, it's always the dust settling of sorts of public policy and how it all nets out. So I think it'll be really interesting to follow this in the next few weeks, and cautiously optimistic that we have a new chapter of possibilities kicking off later this year. Absolutely.
Listen, Chris, thanks for coming on the show today. Hopefully we'll catch up again soon on the next one. How do people get in touch with you if they wanted to reach out to you and follow you?
You can reach me via my LinkedIn or through my email at chrisbarker.cbc@gmail.com.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for coming on the show again, and I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
Thanks, Brett. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Take care.